Oh, hey, come on in. Let's go talk about pocket knives. All right, we have a knife here that was sent in by Mr. Shane Clark, one of our viewers, and he wants to get it repaired. It's a case. It's a large stockman. Looks like 6375 maybe. I'll have to look the numbers up. I don't remember the case numbers off the top of my head, and it's hard to make out that pattern number. Let's see. Well, I need a sharper pencil, which I don't know that I have here, but we'll try one and see. The pattern number is worn on it. I believe that's 6375. We'll look it up again and see. Got a couple of problems. Of course, the pin is broken here, and this blade is completely missing. It's just gone. It's yeah, that one would be the spay blade. This one is not working right, of course, because of that. And then we've got a chip in the bone right here. So we're going to see if we can't fix that up for him. I happen to have another stockman that the main blade was broken on. I've already taken it apart for parts. Same type, and look at that, even same color bone. I wish I had the pile side bone, but I don't. So that's not going to fit it because it's curved the wrong way. But it's the exact same color bone. I've got a replacement spring if I need it, liner. This sheep's foot is in very rough shape, but look at there. Our spay blade out of that one is relatively unused. It's got a little rust on the tang, but not bad. So we're going to do what I refer to as an authentic repair. We're going to repair it with the same parts out of a case knife and the same era. I don't know if it's the exact same year or not because mine did not have a main blade to compare the dots, but the same era, and we'll make this thing as authentic as possible. So we'll get to work on this one now. So to disassemble the knife, I had hoped to be able to clip this pin with my side cutters. The handle was a little loose, and with that chip I was able to get in there somewhat, but I couldn't get the tip of the cutters in enough to remove enough of the pin. So I decided after trying it, we'll go ahead and grind the head off of it. After that, we'll drive the pin on out like normal. So now I'll fight to drive this pin out. I've noticed with the case knives, it seems that the pins are more difficult to drive out than they are in many other brands. I'm not really sure why that is, but they're a tighter fit and more difficult to get out, at least in my opinion. Now we're grinding off those handle pins, and we're going to try to remove the pile side handle. So I've driven the pin part of the way through with a punch. Now I'm able to take my side cutters and try to work and pull the pin out, but the spring tension is still too much. I can't do it without damaging that bone handle. So we'll turn it over and use a smaller punch, see if we can drive it on through further. Well, this pen has proven to be as stubborn as most case knives. But what I have done is I've moved it enough that now the halves of the knife, the layers of the knife, begin to separate. Remember, one of the pins at the end of the knife with the missing blade is already broken. So that lets me pivot these apart, take out the one pin, and begin removing this a layer at a time. I will mark this spring because that's what I do. 2 marks because that's the pile side spring. And removing that one spring has removed some tension off the pin. We'll see if we can drive it through a bit further or drive that end pin out. Something to get things moving on this knife. Did I mention that these pins are stubborn? I swear it's like having another teenager in the house. I don't like doing this, but I'm going to try to grind a little of the head off of this pin from the outside. The reason I don't like doing this is it's very easy for that Dremel tool, for the bit to get away from you, begin to eat up parts of the bolster, and then you've got a mark that you can't sand out. So I'm being as careful as I can, trying to just carefully put a dimple in the very center of that pin, and after that we'll see if we can't drill it out. So, as I often have to do on these, I will clip a little bit of the pin off, drive out what I can, pull another layer loose, clip some more off, grind some more off, drill some more out. We just basically take these pins out a little bit at a time. And it varies from knife to knife. As I said, case knives, they're made with very close tolerances, I suppose. It is typically more difficult to get these pins out, but I've had many other older knives that are the same way. Some, the pins just slide right out and everything comes apart. So it varies from knife to knife. And I finally get that center pin out. Now we'll work on that one on the end. Then we still have the complete pin that's not been cut or broken that's on the main pivot, the one for our main blade. And this is the point that the unthinkable happened on this knife. I turn it over and I realize I broke that front scale with the hammering, the drilling. It just put too much stress on this old brittle bone, and I cracked it clear in two. I had a couple of options, a couple of ideas of gluing this back together. It would keep it original, but it would, you'd always be able to see the crack, or replacing it, since I do have that front scale off of another knife. I went to the owner. He opted to replace it. So we're going to pull the scale off of this old donor knife, put it on his, put his shield on it. We'll try to make this knife as good as possible. Now, I know I could have taken the shield off the old knife, put it on this front handle, and replaced this entire front handle. So it would have been the scale, the liner, both bolsters. But I wanted to keep this knife as original as possible because it was the owner's father's knife. And I didn't want to put any more other parts onto the knife as I could to keep as many parts that was on his original knife as we possibly could do. So I'm going to go back and grind some more off these handle pins and the shield pins before I try to pry this handle off. The last thing I want to do is break this thing. I don't have any more parts left for this knife. So here I'm removing the shield off of the old original scale to move it over onto the donor scale. And I'm going to do this also as carefully as possible. I've cleaned the parts of this knife off camera, not intentionally. Sometimes I just forget to hit start, including the backside of this old bone. Again, the glue is not going to stick very well if there's a lot of dirt, oil, grease, or anything like that. So I clean these parts with a wire brush and then wipe them down with a little bit of alcohol. I really should put gloves on before I even touch them, as sometimes oils on your hand can prevent the glue from adhering well. But at this point, it'll be glued and pinned. I think doing both is kind of superfluous, but it does seal the space between these scales and the liners, helps protect the liners, helps protect the scales. gives it some longevity. And this is the point when I remember, put the gloves on before you touch the glue, because I get tired of wearing glue around on my hands for a couple of days. As far as I know, this is non-toxic. It's not a problem. But between the dust that's in the shop and the polishing compound I get into, the spots of glue just turn black, and I wear that around for a few days when I forget to put on gloves. So here I am doing the right thing. Yay me. Now we'll get all these parts lined up good. I have to get all three holes lined up exactly right. The two holes for the handle pins, and then the one for that center pin. And as well, we've actually got two more because there's holes that go through for this shield as well. This was a pinned shield. Now, I'm leaving the pins on the shield, but they will not go all the way through the liner anymore. I did have to cut them off and grind them off in order to get them loose. And my choices there are either to put new pins in it or to keep the old pins and just have them stick through the handle, but not through the liner. But since we're putting them down with glue, this will be kind of a combination of glued and pinned, and the glue coating those pins will hold this in place securely. This shield is not very likely to come off and get lost the way many of the new ones are that are only glued. Gently tapping the shield just to get the pin set in place. The pin wanted to push up through the front of the shield. So now it's a few days later. The glue has cured well. Now I will tell you, I did it off camera, but I glued the other scale on as well, the rear scale. I removed it, cleaned up under it, glued it in place, and we'll pin it here in a little bit because I like to have both handles glued and pinned whenever possible. So now we're just going to clean off this excess glue. I get pretty sloppy with my glue. I really should do better. There are a lot of things that if I would take a little more time and a little more care would make my job easier and probably make the end result a little better. And I need to start doing that. I get so little time in the shop. You can tell by the how few videos I'm putting out that I'm just not getting much shop time right now. It'll be a few hours here and there, usually on a Saturday, and sometimes no more than 2 or 3 hours a week, if that. So when I'm there, I get in a hurry and I really try to do things I shouldn't. Here you see I had some excess glue that got in the pivot joint, and I've got to clean that out so that those blades will move a little better again. Now I'm going to use the drill bit just to clean those holes out, because the glue gets in the holes, both in the liner and in the bone, and you can't push a pin through very well. So I'm just going to clean that out with the drill bit real quick, and then we'll pin these handles in place to make sure they're good and secure. They won't be going anywhere. And yeah, here you'll see that I'll have to stop and sharpen that pin real quick. If it's sharpened on one end, it's much easier to push it through, and then I push it all the way through, cut that end off, so now I still have the sharp end left to push through on the next pin. We'll pin these in place. Of course, I've sped this up a little bit. You've seen me pin handles plenty of times, but pin it on the outside, pin it on the inside. I am taking a little more time with this, or trying to be more careful with my pinning. I make sure the pin is down against the anvil very firmly, not just the bone, but the end of that pin itself, because I do not want to break another handle. That still upsets me that I did that. But you know, it happens, but typically it happens when I'm not as careful as I need to be. But sometimes accidents like that happen, no matter how careful you are. But I still don't have to like it, and I still think I should work to do better every time. No matter how well you pin the pins, they will be slightly domed on the inside of those liners, and your blade will catch on them. So I'm smoothing the inside of those liners out. I'm not really trying to polish it so much as just flatten out those pins that I just pinned. That'll be four of them. Again, the shield, while originally it had pins that were pinned through, they no longer do protrude through. But I just want to get everything smooth. I don't want any burrs or anything sticking out for the blade to catch on. I make it a habit to engrave my initials and the date on the inside of the pile side liner. This is proof that the knife has been taken apart. I don't want there to be any misunderstandings at any time in the future as to whether this knife is authentic or whether it's a counterfeit. It has been taken apart. It has been repaired. That's really the only way to get your initials engraved on the inside, is to take the knife apart. So it's been repaired, and I'm trying to do the ethical thing and just warn people in the future. All right, one of my favorite times is time to assemble this knife. Now, of course, I did not take apart the pivot pin or take out the pivot pin for the main blade. I had considered doing that when I first took the knife apart. Decided that really I didn't need to. We could do everything we needed by just taking apart the other side of the knife. So we will start by getting our pins, getting those lined up, and typically I'm holding the knife in my hands while I assemble it. I'm trying to do a little better about setting it on the table, putting things in a piece at a time, letting you, the viewer, see what I'm doing so you don't just see me fumbling around with it. But if I'm just doing it without filming it, I just got this up in my hands, putting the knife together, but it's a little harder to follow. So I'm doing it this way slowly and carefully with all the pieces laid out, just to make it easier for you, the viewer, to see what it is that I'm doing. But we get that pin in place. Of course, the back spring is only held in by the center pin, and the spring for, there we go, the spring for this one I had to work it in place, but now we'll slide this one in. I actually had to do it a couple of times, big secret there. That's why there was the transition, but finally get it slid into place. And now all we have to do is to compress those back springs, take the pressure off of them so that we can insert a center pin. Then we can do a test fit of the knife, see how all the pieces fit together, just get a clue how it's going to look and function before we pin everything. I've never found the greatest angle to show this from, but this is a pretty good one though. You can see that the device is closing in and pushing, putting pressure on those back springs and pushing them in right near that center pin. And then I will, of course, get down and look through the hole. When I see daylight through the hole, I know I've got them pretty much lined up. My pin is sharpened on one end. I like to put a drop of oil on it to just make it as easy as I can to slide that through. I have had trouble before when I put the pin in. If there's too much resistance, I tap on it with something and it would catch on the bone and break it. So here first I'll try to just push it through. There we go. That got it. I did not have to tap or hit on it because I don't want to break these bone handles. I've already done that once. Once is more than enough. As I've discussed before, I'm looking for different things when I test this knife. You'll see me open them, close them over and over. I want to see the opening snap, closing snap, which right now opening snap is horrible on that main blade. It's a little rough on this one. Closing snap is great on both of them though. But I'm testing that, the walk, the talk, and as you'll see here, this knife has been used as a hammer, which I have done a lot in my life, but it has peened the end of the bolsters there, which is kind of flattened them out, squeezed in the material, and the blade is binding when I try to open and close the knife. I couldn't really tell this before because with the back pin out, none of the blades were working as smoothly as they should anyway. But that's something we'll try to address. And I'm going to do this by taking a needle file and filing the inside edges of those bolsters. Again, this is just a small flat needle file, and we'll do that. Again, this is not to help the looks of it. We'll sand the end of it to make it look a little better. I'm just wanting to open up that aperture a little bit, or the space between the bolster and the liners, because right now with that bolster peened in like that, it's just too tight. The blade is catching and rubbing on it. I probably should have taken a little more material off. I did this, tested the blade, and after I oiled things, it moved pretty good. But once the knife was pinned together, it was still a little bit stiff, and we'll talk about that in our final analysis. So here's one thing you can do when you're trying to free up a blade. You oil it and then you open and close it over and over and over as fast as you can. A lot of times I will count it and do 100 times. Perhaps tape up the blade so that I'm not having to be careful with a sharp blade, and, or wrap it in a rag or something. Open and close it over and over and over. And a lot of times if you've got a small imperfection that's causing one to drag or hang up, not have good snap, that may just fix it. It is not perfect, but it's pretty close. So we're going to go ahead and peen this knife and put it together. I'll file the end of the pin first. I used to think that you just started peening on a pin, but if there are any rough edges on the pin to begin with, you have a hard time peening it and making it look nice and round and domed. It will be very irregularly shaped. As well, a good tip for anyone is to polish the end of your peening hammer. That's one reason I don't use a big ball peen hammer. I use one of these small lightweight hammers. I can clean and polish the end of that very well, because if you have marks, scratches, gouges on the end of your hammer, those marks will transfer over onto the pen and you'll have irregularly shaped bumps on your pen. So to make your peening look nice, file the pen, get it very smooth, and then have a good clean face on your hammer that you're peening it with. So I know some of you are already asking yourselves how this is going to work. There's a chip of bone missing here. Normally I would peen the pin out until it flares out tight against the hole in the bone, but I can't do that here. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to kind of use a little guesswork. And of course I didn't get it right the first time, so I'll take a little more off. And I'm going to peen it down to the surface of where the bone should be. Even though there's a big gap of bone missing there, I can pretty much estimate where that bone should be. I'm going to peen it down to that point, and then when we fill in the missing bit of handle material here, then that'll be all smooth and nice. Now I could have tried to patch the handle material first, drill a new hole in it, peen down tight against that, and that probably would have worked very well. But I chose to peen this first, then patch the handle, and so that's the way I have to do it. Just peen the pin down to where I think the surface of the bone should be, and I got real close with it. And yeah, then at that point when we patch, we'll fill in around that pin and everything looks nice and smooth. And of course I'm inserting my 7/1000 inch feeler gauge in order to peen that to the correct tension. All right, and we'll test these blades. They've got good side-to-side wobble, good opening and closing snap. This blade's a little hard to open, but works well. Main blade works pretty well, a little stiff. Doesn't quite have the opening snap I want, but we're in good shape. So now we're going to go ahead and sand these bolsters. I'm starting with a 400 grit belt. Again, sometimes I use a more aggressive belt for this, but these pins are not standing up very high, so we'll just take our time, get it with this 400 grit belt so we won't leave a lot of scratches or marks in here. And these pins disappear very well. It's odd. Sometimes when you are working on a knife, you can work and struggle for hours and you just cannot make those pins disappear. You can still see the little ring around them. Sometimes the metal is just a different recipe of nickel, silver, or steel, or whatever, and it just shows up as a different color, and so you can find it real well. On this particular knife, these pins blended perfectly. You'd have to study the knife for a while to find where those pivot points are, which is what you want. You want it just to look like one solid piece of metal, and this time, thankfully, it turned out that way. So I'll spend a little more time cleaning up the end of this bolsters. Again, it had been used as a hammer, which years ago I used to do all the time. I always had a pocket knife, and if I needed to hammer something lightly, I just grabbed the pocket knife and used it. I didn't even notice how much damage I was doing to the knife, but a lot of my older knives have deep scratches and gouges from that. But since this one did, I took a little more time to try to clean that up. I did not get out every scratch and dent. All of that was part of the character of the knife, but I did want to clean it up enough that it was not interfering with the action of the blade. Now I'll put a few finishing touches on this bone and shield. I'm mainly just trying to clean the glue off of it. I do have to wind up and go back and do a little more of this later, clean off some of the glue by hand, and then sand it lightly again before we polish the knife, but some of that happened off camera. Alright, so now we're going to try to fix this bone here, patch this up. We have some pieces missing, some chips out of it. Of course, I have glued down the rest of this handle, which of course we want it glued down. We don't ever want it coming loose again, so it's glued and pinned. But especially this pin is not going to hold it well with that crack around it. So the first thing I've got to do is clean off any excess glue that might be sticking to the bone here, because of course glue does not stick down on top of glue. So it's a kind of a drum-shaped carbide bit on the rotary tool. We'll chip away any glue with that. Okay, clean it with a little bit of alcohol. I don't have any of my index cards here at the house where I'm doing this, so I'm just going to use some notebook paper. Okay, I'll just use a toothpick to thoroughly mix these two. Now, let's find the correct color. For my brown, I'm going to use cinnamon. Just raid the wife's spice rack and you'll be surprised how well this works. A few more red tones in that. So for that, I'm going to use some paprika. I may have it a little too red. We shall see. And there we go. Now we wait. All right, well, let's see if we can finish this one up, at least everything but the polishing. I can tell I'll need a little bit of that, but here I've taken the tape off. I'll try to hold it so hopefully you can see it well. The epoxy is built up here, it climbed up on the tape, so it's standing up. We'll just grind that down and then see how it looks. Now the color is, a little bit bright and shiny, but it dulls some when we grind it. It's not going to be a perfect patch, but I think it's going to be a good one. I think we match the colors fairly closely. Now I won't be able to talk while I'm doing this, or at least not where you can understand, because I'll be wearing my mask. So we want to be safe. All right, mask off. And yeah, that's a pretty decent patch. Now I will sand these handles lightly with the sander. Most of the jigging pattern is worn down on this one, so there's not really, I don't really have to put any of that back to make the patch match. It is a little bit lighter. I thought about it after I had already applied this. I could have ground some pieces of that broken bone and used it to color the epoxy, and it would have matched much better. I don't know why I didn't think of that, but I didn't. But still, the cinnamon is a fairly close match, especially when you are not trying to deceive anyone. You don't want to try to hide a patch, but instead you want the world to know it's there, but you just made the knife more usable again. So yeah, still a little bit light opening snap on this one. Great snap on that replacement blade, opening and closing. Opening snap's a little weak on that one, but closing snap is great. Again, I think we had so much material that was dinged up on the end of this. I think that's part of what's causing the problem with the opening snap, because the spring action is good. The spring still moves very good. We have great closing snap. It's just that opening snap. So I believe it's where the end of that was so messed up. I filed it and sanded it till I was really scared to do much more to it. I certainly didn't want to make things loose. But anyway, yeah, so a little bit of surface sanding, some polishing, and then we'll see how this one looks. Thanks, guys.